Okay. Thank you. I'm sharing my screen. Let me move it a bit. Oops. Hang on. I guess I need a little bit of practice here too. Come on. Yeah. I'm going to start again. Thank you for your patience. Thought I had it all queued up and ready to go. Start. There we go. We have Lauren's lovely PowerPoint. So again, just to reiterate, and for any new folks that we have, if you're a guest, welcome.
Did you get your cookie?
We are asking you to mute yourself throughout the meeting to show respect for our speakers and also to make the meeting just generally more pleasant for everyone. If you don't want to be seen, if you're moving around quite a bit, which I was guilty of today, you can go to your video icon and ask that you please stop your video if you feel like you need to eat, jump around, or make funny faces. We're also, we want to see your lovely face. So again, if you see yourself and you see your square and you don't look like you're properly centered, or if we can't see your eyes, or if you're too dark or too far, we ask that you try to self-correct so that we can in fact see your faces, because we all do miss that. And let's see, keep your device still. Oops, somebody, what happened? somebody took away my video, my screen share. But anyway, and just general politeness, again, if you could please just remember to keep yourself muted. And then lastly, the thing that we really are trying to do a really full front assault on folks that have not been joining us. We want them with us, and we want them to know that there's still much value in this club and in our camaraderie and in our projects that continue on. The Pandemic Response Committee is a disaster response committee, I should say, has been a fine example of the work continuing. So please, if you have a friend that you notice has not been to the Zoom meetings, reach out to them. And if they or you are having issues with technology, I ask that you reach out to me or to John, Lauren, of course, too, which she's, I think, willing. So, and also for friends that have not been joining, they need to know that they can call in. It's very simple. We don't need a lot of fancy technology to join the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Rosemarie.
Right, and I would ask that Tom Strode cue up the piano, and here's the bell.
Oh.
Thank you so much. My husband is here in the room with me, Don Dietrich, and we're trying to sing, and it wasn't going as well as I thought it might. So. But that was great. And Tom, thank you for your steadfast support every single week you produce for us, and we so appreciate your abilities. Moving on to inspiration, I would invite Leo Shedden to come forth. Leo, nice to see you here today.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Perhaps one needs to be inspired to provide the Rotary inspiration. Tom provided some inspiration with his piano playing just then. My inspiration comes from my recollections of our late friend in Rotary, Art Holst. Many of us remember Art, a World War II vet and good friend who passed away about a year and a half ago. I often drove Art home from our Rotary meetings, always with a great conversation, reflections on the day's event, both inside and outside of Rotary. More recently, our Rotary presentations, particularly in the inspiration portion like this, have had several mentions of the enrichments that nonprofit organizations add to our lives and add to our community. This is certainly true. Rotary Club serves as a front and center example. There are many, many more. Today, we will hear from speakers representing schools in the area that enrich our lives in many ways. I suspect Art and I would have had discussions on these points. It is not hard to imagine a conversation asking ourselves, do we recognize that these nonprofits exist only because they also have for-profit businesses? Isn't it obvious that these many nonprofits, organizations that serve to enrich our lives exist only because of the for-profit businesses? This, of course, is also true, and yes, I'm sure we recognize it. There are many in this club who have founded businesses that generated profits that enabled them to join Rotary and provide support to many other nonprofits. It also enabled them to hire employees who were then able to pay Rotary dues or pay school tuition or support their religious institution of choice. These include small businesses, which overall provide a majority of the jobs in the U.S. Beyond that are mid and large businesses that generate profits that, among other things, are enablers of nonprofits, either via corporate contributions or via employee participation. The COVID-19 era brings tenuous financial times for business and organizations of all types, and a full recovery is still very much out in front of us. So again, let's celebrate the enrichments that nonprofits bring to our lives and also celebrate their for-profit enablers. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Leo. Very powerful. For-profits are enablers of all the work that we do. And stepping up to lead our song today, we are at camp for the day, and we've invited Downs Harold to lead us in a camp song. What do you have, Downs?
Well, let's see what we can do, folks. The title says Camp Songs, and as song leader, you're supposed to try to match up what your topic is. So I tried to say education, and I started thinking education. So I went to Siri and I said, Siri, what do I do for camp songs? And Siri said, well, it's the wrong time of year for education because a lot of people actually have their kids at home now, and they're actually tired of them because they've had them for the last 3 months and they're trying to get rid of them. So they want to send them to camp. So why don't we do something with camp and follow through? So I tried to remember what it was like a few years when I was at camp. And one of our favorite songs at camp was My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. Some of you have realized I've done this before at Rotary meetings, so the old timers may recognize that. It's an easy song. The tune is easy. And in thinking about this, I've also realized that in the past, since we've gone to Zoom, we've tended to be a listening club when it comes to songs versus singing club. So today you have the opportunity to sing. You will all be muted, so the only people you'll hear will be yourselves. So just pretend you're in your shower and just singing that way. But you're gonna have 2 opportunities to do My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. And then keeping with the education theme today too, I also went to Siri and said, Siri, can you help me on Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean? Well, then Siri said, you realize that Bonnie is really a Scottish folk song, and it started, and comes from 1746, the Battle of Culloden in Scotland, and turns out it was Bonnie Prince Charles Everett Stuart, who was actually born in Italy. He was trying to take over the throne in England, and there was a battle there, and he was defeated, and he went into exile and was shipped off. So therefore Bonnie went over the sea. So then it was a song about My Bonnie went over the ocean, and whether we want him back or not, that's it. So I'm going to screen share now and see if that works. And I've got my own picture's coming up on the desktop, and it's not working that way. Okay, I'm going to scratch and for that. let's go. I'm going to walk you through the words. I think most of you know it. If you don't, it's a simple one. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me, to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. So let's go through it once. We don't have a piano, just a cappella. You can, again, your mics aren't on, so you can use whatever tone, or I could say we're singing in the key of R, which is Rotary, and we'll follow from there. So on 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me, to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. Okay, you've been through it once. Now the trick is we're really kind of prove that there are, Kiwanians say Rotarians can't chew gum and walk at the same time. I want to prove that we can do something a little different than that. When we sang this song at camp, the fun and games was every time there was a B word, a word that started with B, you would stand up, and the next B word would come, you would sit down. So you would go, my Bonnie lies over the ocean, my Bonnie lies over the sea. Well, realizing that for some of us, it would take 2 lines in the song to even stand up, I've decided let's just raise your hand and your arm with it. So now we're going to sing it again. And this time you're going to get your exercise, which you haven't had so much in the past. Again, the B words, Bonnie is a B word, and bring back and Bonnies are other keywords. And you'll go up and down. You can watch me. Hopefully I'll not get any more confused than you are, and we'll have a good time. So we're going to do it again. 1, 2, 3. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me, to me. Bring back, oh, bring back my Bonnie to me. Give yourself a hand.
Oh my goodness.
Now you prove that not only is the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor a great singing club, but you're also can multitask, and we appreciate that, and we'll try to figure out some other ways we can do that in the future. Thank you for singing today, Rotary.
Hooray, applause to all of you. Way to go. Boy, that took a lot of courage, Downs. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Thank you to our Zoom meeting coordinators. Welcome to everyone. And for the 3rd time, just to make sure you all heard it, welcome back, John Berry, transfer member coming back to our club from a virtual club in Guatemala. Glad to have you with us. The Zoom meeting coordinators today are Lori Walters, John White, Sarah Maddock, and Jim Eggerdahl. Our photographer, Fred Beutler, and today's reporter is Paula Brown. I see you in the house. Thank you, Paula. Attendance is being taken by Barbara Eichmuller and Agnes Redding. As always, we have birthdays, and that's the really good news. Andrew Brenner is having a birthday on June 20th. Phil Hughes, June 21st. Jim Cook is on June 22nd. Amy Goodman, June 24th. Katie Bauer is June 28th. And Daphne Skalbader is on June 30th. Happy birthday to all of you Rotarians. Well, I see Betsy Hammond is with us today, and I want to extend Rotary's condolences, Betsy, on the loss of John Hammond, a long and wonderful Rotarian, and we're so sorry to hear the sad news that he has passed. John passed away on June 11th at Glacier Hills. He and fellow Rotarian Betsy Hammond were members of the Lakeshore Rotary Club of St. Joseph, Michigan. And then when they moved to Ann Arbor 15 years ago, Betsy joined our club in 2006, while John maintained his membership in the Lakeshore Club before joining Ann Arbor North in 2015. But then he transferred to us in 2016. Until recently, John was a regular attendee at all of our luncheon meetings and was always generous to the Rotary Foundation. In particular, he seemed to have a heart for Polio Plus. Eventually, he and Betsy achieved major donor status. John was 87. A service in St. Joseph will be held at a future date. And those of us in the club who knew John as a kind and gentle man. He most certainly used those traits along with the 4-way test in his career as a judge. We extend our sympathies to you, Betsy, and to the family. Let's bow our heads in a moment of silence and remember John Hannon. Thank you so much. Well, you know, our major fundraiser is the golf and tennis outing, and you know that it's canceled. But the good news is Joanne Pearson is here to tell us about what's next and how we're going to do something virtually for our club. Joanne, are you there?
I'm here. Grazie, Rosemary.
Prego, prego.
So, as you all know, Rosemary said we can find another way to fundraise. And I'm not sure. The golf and tennis outing is rescheduled for September 13, 2021. But in the meantime, we need to raise funds for our good works. And so, I don't know if we were present or not, but last December when we held our club assembly and we asked you all for ideas on other ways you might be interested in engaging for a fundraising event, the subject of wine bubbled to the top. And so you can mark your calendars for August. We don't have a date yet. We will be doing an Italian wine night, virtual. You can do it in the safety of your own home. With Paisanos. Michael Rowdy of Paisanos is going to give a talk on Italian wines. We'll have a number of different tickets, event to just hear the talk. You can pick up dinner from Paisanos, dinner and perhaps a bottle of wine. So we'll have some different things you can come in on and raise some funds for our good works. And then to look forward for those of you who are already having angst about that holiday gift shopping, you will be able to shop at our online Rotary Club of Ann Arbor auction toward the end of the year. Special shout out to Kathy Waugh, Tip My Glass, who is taking the lead on that for us. So wine event, Italian wine night with Pisano, August, and an online auction coming down the road.
Ciao, John. Wow.
Salute, Rotarians. Ciao, grazie.
Salute, Joanne. By the way, I'm worried about your drinking problem in the middle of the day. We frequently see you with a glass.
Yeah. Okay, this, full disclosure, cranberry juice.
Cranberry juice. All right. Okay. Way to go. Well, that's wonderful news. I hope it's very successful. We'll be there for you. Next, we have an update from Marcia Lane. You know, we're surrounded by inequity, injustice, and so much social unrest. And the Peace Committee has taken this on, as did your board of directors today. And I would invite Marcia to come forward and tell us what the Peace Committee has been doing. Marcia?
Thank you, Rosemary. And excuse me, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as Rosemary said, she has asked the Peace Committee to help coordinate this effort. Most of you received this week an email from Sharna Davis Hatcher. She's an attorney who's also the president of the Rotary Club of Auburn Hills. It went out to about 1,500.
Well, how it does that?
1,500, sorry, somebody's not muted. It went out to our district, about 1,543 recipients. So if you have not received it, let me know, and we'll send you the entire thing. But I'm going to quote from her because I couldn't say some of this any better than she has. And because it also reflects what we talked about last week in 2 different Peace Committee meetings, that if Rotary doesn't do something, who will? Or why are we Rotarians? She asks that Rotarians meet this moment by activating Rotary's network and influence to seek racial justice through civic engagement. We feel an urgency among people of goodwill to seek justice fueled by courage and persistence. And this is not, we're all feeling like this is not something that we can allow to let stagnate. We need to keep a momentum up. This is an ongoing thing. This is not an occasional speaker for our meetings. So she asks that fellow Rotarians join her in civic engagement for lasting change. This is an opportunity for us to do the work of uprooting systemic racism. Rotarians are people of action, and we're led by the ethical principles delineated in the 4-way test. So we have a charge to do something. And she acknowledges the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers who serve and protect with a commitment to uphold the public trust. Also, that Rotary is not a political organization. This is not about politics. This is a call for civic engagement, which offers a variety of opportunities in the service of social justice. So, what can people of action do? She's got some general suggestions, and what the Peace Committee is trying to do now is to get much more specific. There are so many resources out there right now. We have started collecting these. Many of them come with recommendations. They might be a TED Talk, a blog. United Way of Washtenaw County just did a 5-day challenge. So what we've done is taken assignments, 2 of us on each item, to explore that, to view what's there, to follow the links, and to find the best of the best. So what we want to do is find out what's out there that's really excellent. How does it lend itself? How can we share it by members? By email, by having a speaker, by showing a TED Talk, and then eventually we hope by doing breakout sessions on Zoom if we're still not meeting face-to-face. So we would facilitate a particular item, some resource that we found, and ask you all to join one of these groups that interests you in particular, and then report back to the club on a regular basis. So we will, right now, our request is that if you're interested in serving on this special initiative, you don't have to formally join the Peace Committee, but to join the group that is trying to organize this, that is exploring the resources that are out there to find the best for our membership. Please let me know, and we'll be following up very quickly with this. Thank you.
And thank you, Marcia. Don and I spent our lunch today talking about this. We want to learn, we want to talk, we want to do better. So we're with you, and I hope the rest of the club steps up too. Thank you to the Peace Committee. Stepping up is what Norma Sarkar did to the pandemic and our Pandemic Response Fund. Norma, you have an update on that, don't you?
I do. Good afternoon. I am going to share my screen. Whoops. Just a moment. Oh my goodness. There we go. Okay. Sorry for the delay. There we are. Okay. I'll get better at this with time. And it looks like I'm going to get a lot of practice. Okay. Very good. So I wanted to bring you an update. It's June 17th. And our campaign was May 1st to May 31st. So first of all, thank you so much on this bright, sunny day for everyone who did so much to help us. Here is our update. We had $21,400 redirected from Rotary Club funds. We had $34,600 in donations from Rotarians, friends of Rotarians. And so our total was $56,000, which means we have earned a $6,000 match, which means our total fund balance is $62,000. So thank you one and all. We are, the Disaster Response Committee is so pleased that we could raise this money to assist our community while we were sitting in our houses. Okay, so just a quick update. You know, these were the disbursements we've already made. Those have been in the harpoon, so I'm not going to go over this, but we have two recent fund disbursements I wanted to share with you. We awarded $5,000 to the Hope Clinic. They would like to put some benches and a sheltered area outside for their clients waiting for the food pantry and hot meals. Their demand has increased significantly, so they'd like to provide a place away from the weather while people are waiting. And then our second distribution was to Avalon Housing. And this was for assistance for their COVID-19 critical staff support. And those critical staff assisted clients who live in supportive housing with food delivery, medication delivery, essentially helping people to stay safe and well in their house. So those were our two disbursements. And we now have $12,335 as our fund balance. So what we've decided is we're going to take a little break just until August so that maybe we can better understand what some more long-term implications are. So we're going to continue to look at community need. By then, hopefully, we'll know what's going to happen with schools, which should have an impact on some of the nonprofits supporting them. So I will definitely report back to you on what happens to the remainder of our funds. But again, I thank you all so much for your contributions. And if you check the Harpoon, you will see the all the members of the Disaster Response Committee. Thank you very much. Oh, also,
one more thing.
Yeah, the Rotary virtual convention ends this Saturday. So there's a big article in the Harpoon, but if you'd like to go to Rotary International free, there are going to be two general sessions, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 10:15.
Thanks for that reminder. It's all about Hawaii. And thanks on behalf of the club to the Disaster Response Committee, and thank you to all of you for your generosity. What a difference you've made in our community. Moving on, I think we have Dennis Powers, who is here today to introduce the speaker. Dennis, you're on.
Our speakers in June will be Rotarians holding leadership positions in the larger community. They will update us on how their organizations have adapted to continue functioning during the coronavirus pandemic. Today, John Huber, head of school at Emerson School, will tell us about the transition to virtual learning since schools were directed to close during the state of emergency declared by Governor Whitmer. The governor this noontime announced that she anticipated that in-person instruction in the school system would resume this fall. That is more of a challenge than it might have first seemed. In the Boston and New York City public schools, the format that's been announced is a mixed day of virtual learning and in-person learning to protect children and staff from the lingering effects of the coronavirus. So John will tell us how Emerson particularly and the schools generally plan to approach this challenge in the fall.
And now I'm going to make sure I'm unmuted. Hopefully you all can hear me, yes? And I see thumbs up, and I'll share screen in a moment. Thank you, Dennis, for the very kind introduction. And I would ask that as questions may arise, what I'm going to try to do is look in the chat at the end and leave some time at the end to answer those. Now comes the hardest part, where I make sure that I not just share screen, but share computer sound, so I can do this correctly. Give me 1 second. Let me get that slide deck up, and then we will get going. You know, I've come to learn a lot about Zoom over these past couple months as we have sought to maintain education for our students since mid-March. But even this morning, I was learning new things from my fellow Rotarians, so I appreciate that. You know, what I can do is share with you what fifth graders have taught me, which is if you're on a Windows, you can turn your picture upside down, and that's a lot of fun. So, you know, just keep that in mind if that's something that you want to learn how to do. I'll share that with you. All right, hopefully you are now seeing a presentation writ large with a big screen, yes? Great. How schools are adapting, and as Dennis said, you know, really we got to drill down into the specifics here. More importantly, not just how schools are adapting, but how students, families, and educators are really adapting to distance learning. We've undergone this incredible experiment that was really forced on us by necessity and have completely upended our traditional methods of teaching and of learning with not a lot of time to really plan for what that looks like. So, you know, on the one hand, I've heard that a great way to swim is to be tossed into the deep end of the pool and then see what happens. On the other hand, as we talk about working with students, particularly young students, parents get a little itchy if we say to them, you know, we're going to experiment here. We're going to be figuring things out over the next couple months. So there are definitely two different approaches as to whether the way any of these schools did it is good or not. So more specifically, how are students, families, and educators at one particular Ann Arbor Independent School adapting to distance learning, specifically our own? By way of brief introduction, as I said, my name is John Huber. I serve as the head of school for Emerson, which is 300 students, gifted and academically talented for young fives, right below kindergarten through 8th grade. And I don't want to pretend like I am representative of all schools or all even independent schools, but at least it's to give you a window on where we've been and where we think we're going. Let's see if I can flip. I think important to say at the get-go here is some recognition of the privileges that are afforded our schools. I was originally to have done this with Peter Ferroin, who's the head of Green Hills School. Unfortunately, he had a family emergency that brought him away. So I would say that he would agree, as I've shared this presentation with him, to what some of these privileges are. One of which is that we are independent schools, which means by our very structure, the decision-making happens on the ground within our own school. So that affords us a certain degree of speed and flexibility that we really appreciate in our independence. Some of the resources of the school itself. We as a school provide, for example, technology for all of our students, grades kindergarten to 5th grade. So if we have to say to a family that they need to be learning remotely, we have Chromebooks available to be able to provide to our students in a very short amount of time. And that's just one example of the type of resources. The more important resource, of course, are the people that we have and our ability to personalize that support. Not just by the staffing model that we have, but also to have subject specialists and technology specialists. We ended up finding very quickly that we needed not just a technology specialist to support the teachers teaching remotely, but also one for the parents to be able to answer all of their technology questions as well. Let's not also forget that we do have the resources that are many of our families. Emerson does provide need-based financial aid to 1 out of 6 students. I'm very proud of that because that number has actually grown over the 5 years that I've been here. But it also means that 5 out of the 6 are not in need of financial support. So I want to wholly recognize we did not have the same challenges that Ann Arbor Public Schools did in first and foremost thinking about free and reduced meals and making sure that basic necessities were being met. We had a privilege here, to be sure, in which our families, by and large, were able to manage and support the distance and remote learning we provided. And then finally, just the community of peer schools and the sharing of best practices, being able to talk to heads over in South Korea and in Japan and other hot spots when COVID-19 came out, who were weeks ahead of us to see what they were doing and what made sense to their students in their school. This is usually where suddenly I lose the ability to click. Oh, pause. All right, I will pause there. So back in March, you know, it was Wednesday, March 11th. I remember this date very specifically. We said to our parents, this is right when announcements about closure were happening, we're gonna need to take 2 days to start preparing for things here. So keep your kids home and we are going to meet as a faculty to sort out what remote learning is gonna look like, you know, for the next, who knows, we'll see. And little did I know really at that time, as I was saying goodbye to the students, that would be the last time that I would get to see them face to face in the building for the remainder of the school year. In some ways that made it easier, not knowing. I think there would have been a lot less sadness, you know, the hugging and all that and the sense of farewell, but it's been hard. You know, the reason that we come to schools is to get to see students. And when you can't see them except on these tiny little windows that we've all got up on the top of our screens, it's hard. So I remember meeting with the faculty and I said, okay, we've got 48 hours. Here's our Apollo moment. You know, we've got a square peg, round hole. Let's figure this out. And then starting on Monday, March 16th, began what would be the journey of 12 weeks of distance learning. You know, so 48 hours. I have a funny video to share with you. Hopefully I've got the sound on and I'm going to see if I can keep an eye on you all. If you've seen it, I apologize. It's 27 seconds, so it's very brief. And it was making the rounds early on in the remote learning process. But if you haven't seen it, I think it exemplifies how faculty as a whole felt during this very sudden transition. This is not an Emerson teacher, but I think it could represent not just Emerson, but all teachers who suddenly launched into this. So let's see if I can play and hopefully I've got sound turned on.
Hey, so as some of you guys might know, I'm a music teacher, and I found that one of the best ways that I can process the whole transition to online learning and teaching is to write a song. So I wrote a song. I'd like to share that with you guys now. Here we go.
Yeah, that's how a lot of us were feeling at that particular moment. And if you hadn't gotten to see that, I'm glad that I got to share that with you today. Here's what made it particularly hard. Here are some realities that I've come to know about teaching and in school. And first, children, especially young children, really learn best in small groups with direct face-to-face instruction with their teachers. And if you disagree with this, you know, please consider the first grade teacher who's trying to shift from her own classroom and 15 students in it to a Zoom meeting with 15 people in it, and they're first graders. You know, what do you think works most easily here? Hard enough just to wrangle Rotarians into one big meeting here. Think about first graders. More seriously, instruction really should be broken down into units and segments. There should be chunking appropriate to the age and the stage of the learner. Early on in this process, I had a parent say, can't I just put my child in front of the laptop for 7 hours? And we were saying, no, it's not right by how children learn. And a good teacher is going to intentionally chunk the day into reasonable pieces. Number 3, children aren't learning just the subjects and content, they're learning their social emotional regulation techniques and the socialization skills. Part of school is learning about how to be a member of society at large. And you can't do that easily when you are not together recess serves more than just physical education and fun. It's about problem solving. It's about working with your friends and then breaking up with your friends and trying to figure out what comes next. 4, and this is the case for any of you who have had to teach at home, experienced teachers really have a large toolbox of ways to work with children. And what that means is, if a child is not getting, let's say, double-digit multiplication right away, the teacher knows the 12 different ways that that's hard and knows which tool to use for that child. As a parent, unless you've been an educator, you probably know the one way that it doesn't work, and it's the way that you got stuck. And so this is where I think parents trying to teach their children at home, well, I learned it this way, why aren't you learning it that way as well? Well, it's because students learn differently, and they definitely learn differently from their parents. And then number 5, this is really the dirty little secret, right? Maybe not so secret. School is in part childcare, so that parents can work. I heard very early on from families of our youngest, and families for whom they were both first responders and needing to be supporting the pandemic as it hit, how very hard this was in trying to keep education going while also trying to attend to their own needs. So, not every parent was in that case. Some like to get on the Peloton. I get that, whatever is the reason, but childcare is part of the deal. So let's talk about how the students are feeling. This is, I had said early on to our students, hey, write me. I would love to write you back, just as a way to stay connected. And this was a heartbreaking letter. It's actually on my door right outside my office here. And I won't read it all. Clearly, as a kindergartner, may have gotten some help from mom or dad. I'm just gonna acknowledge that at the get-go. It was very well typed. But I'll read it. And it was this child processing having to be away from each other. And he went on about pistol shrimp, which is a thing I didn't know anything about, and how they have to stay away from each other. So if they are friends with each other, they have to stay 9 millimeters away because apparently the noise can hurt them. That is like us now. We should stay away from each other because we don't want to accidentally hurt each other, but we shouldn't stay only 9 millimeters away. I miss Emerson. And I will tell you, that broke my heart. That was just such a sad recognition that one of the pieces most missed was not just the teachers in the classroom, the normalcy of it all, but the chance to be with friends and with classmates. So I'm gonna not tear up. I'm gonna keep going here. Let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. So let's talk about what we did at Emerson. And I will tell you, this is where we came to a process through trial and error, through discussion of best practices with our fellow schools. And again, I do not hold this up as the model, but we're proud of what we did and where we came to. And what we really quickly recognized was that we needed to have daily two-way communication and interaction for all students. And now that might take different sort of formats, and it may not all take a format as being on Zoom, to be honest with you. So screens were one way of maintaining that two-way communication, but not the only way to do it. We quickly, I would say within the first week or two, decided that we needed to develop a community day, and it really served for 2 purposes. One was that it was a chance for students to engage in socialization and have student engagement and take care of, or as best as one can, the social, emotional, mental, physical health of the students. So that's PE time, where the teacher's getting on and showing how to do the push-ups, and everybody's doing the push-ups, even the kindergartners. It also served a very real purpose of supporting our faculty, who were understandably feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and challenged by the situation that they'd had 48 hours to prep and plan for. So it gave our main classroom teachers a chance to have those meetings, have those conversations, get things done. What I ended up doing as head of school, as a means of both engaging in that connection, well, actually, I'm not gonna lie, it's so that I could actually get to see kids, but not just to help support them, but also to give our teachers a bit of a break. I did a half-hour story lesson. It was just story reading over Zoom for all of our students, grades kindergarten through 5th grade, purely optional if they wanted to. And I would say over half did each day. So the picture that you see in me there, 2 of our young students hearing me read, I think Elmer and the Dragon, if you remember my father's Dragon series from way back when, that was during the beard coronavirus stage, so the beard's gone now. So let's move on from that. And then Tuesday to Friday would be our instructional days. And that would be a mix of group live instruction, one-on-one check-ins, pre-recorded instruction, also a chance for parents to connect, because as we were not just supporting the students, recognizing how much we needed to support the parents as well. Here's a sample of what a couple schedules will look like. And I won't bore you with the particular details about what went when and where. But for us, our lower school, which is kindergarten through 5th grade, by and large looks similar to what a normal school day is like. And that was intentionally so, because if we're trying to provide some degree of normalcy for students in an abnormal time, we want to have that routine in place as much as possible. And most critical is to start the day with a morning meeting where, as a teacher, you are checking in and making sure that not just every individual student is good, but as a community, they're ready for that day. Reading groups, individual check-ins, foreign language, a lot of time on individual check-ins. And we gave time for lunch and recess because, you know, these are important pieces. Quest is a new program for our school. This is a coding, engineering, science, robotics, technology program combined, and then end the day with music. In so many ways, we tried to keep many of the rituals of our lower school going. We have a morning sing with all the kids, and Mr. Matt, our lower school music teacher, kept the morning sings going. For 6th to 8th grade, again, it's going to look like a fairly traditional schedule for those Tuesdays to Fridays. Now, again, not every teacher would hold it as a live 45-minute session. They might have pre-recorded pieces, they might have individual check-ins, but the subjects themselves, by and large, stayed and maintained. The one change that we did do, I'll just say in passing, is our middle school had started at 8 o'clock. And this is going to come as a shocker. Middle schoolers aren't real keen to wake up early. And so when it was, could we start later? Well, yeah, we can do that. I think we can do that. So we moved to a later start time for them. And honestly, as we look into the fall, which I'll come to in a moment, debating whether we want to keep that going or not. Oh yeah, and what about grades or attendance or conferences or auction or locker or desk clean out or graduation for that matter? Well, I'll start with graduation because the picture that you see there is my middle school director, Andy Zimmer, and I individually driving to each house to go and deliver graduation signs. I know you've seen a bunch of graduation signs around town. We started at about 9 o'clock in the morning and ended by 9:30 at night and got to every single house. And it was actually the first chance that we'd gotten to see many of these students. Well, actually, it was the first chance we got to see these students face to face since back in March. So it was heartening and it was lovely and a great way to show school pride. Grades were a topic of big debate among school leaders, including myself, and particularly, especially at the beginning of things when we just didn't know how families were reacting, what their health situation would be like, could their kids even get onto the computer. We decided for the youngest grades to maintain the current system, but recognize that there were going to be some things that would not be assessed, in which we would just say not assessed. For middle school, we followed actually what many colleges did, which is to say a credit, no credit as a baseline, but if they wanted to letter grade, they could have a letter grade. Honestly, if we were in a full closure situation going forward, we probably might use the letter grade as the standard, but in the middle of all this, we were all trying to figure things out as we went. Attendance was required. Now, attendance could take a lot of different forms, but the primary piece that we were really cautious of there is that we just didn't have a student drop off the radar and that we wouldn't know how he or she was doing. And perhaps no surprise, if you are a child who is dealing with social emotional difficulties, seeing a therapist, seeing a counselor on a regular basis, and then suddenly you shut them up in their own house, it doesn't get better, and it might get worse, as well as bringing out new concerns. And so one of the pieces we wanted to make sure is we knew that the child was present. Now, if the parent said they're needing to take the break, that's fine, but we didn't want to simply say, show up, and if you do, great. If not, no big deal. We wanted to keep tabs on everybody. Parent-teacher conferences, we did remotely. That actually moved pretty smoothly. The school auction, I just have to share the tale. What was that? Wednesday, March 11th was our last day where we shut things down. Our auction was scheduled for Friday, March 13th. And that was literally 24 hours notice by the state that you couldn't have groups. And I will say credit to the team. They pivoted pretty quickly. The theme of it was going to be roots to grow, wings to fly. And since we had already paid for the catering, we'd already paid for the food, we actually turned it into food to go, wings to fly. And it worked out nicely. Everybody who had ordered came by, got their dinner and takeout. They were able to buy a bottle of wine from the wine auction that we were doing. We ended up doing a later online auction. It wasn't as robust, but it was successful in at least being better than zero. And the team did a really good job. But yeah, I kind of wish we'd had that auction a week before. Would have been nicer. Locker and desk clean out. I just have to laugh and share one story. We ended up as a team, volunteers coming in, cleaning at all the desks, and then doing a drop-off day for all the families. I was in charge of 7th grade lockers. We did have one locker with 4 science experiments of lunch dishes going on, and I just put it in a bag and put a label on it, and off it goes. Mom or dad or somebody else can take care of that one later. Couple more slides. What did we learn out of the process? 5 things I would say. One is that simplification of the technology tools is really key. If I'm a teacher and I'm going to use Zoom and then Google Classroom and then Seesaw and all these different tools, that works out really easily. But when we say, dear parents, here are 5 different logins for 8 different times you need to check in over the week, it gets hard. And honestly, I don't tease the parents. I think it's hard too for the students to maintain a degree of independence. So simplification being key. Content time is king. That's FaceTime directly between the student and the teacher, whether that's one-on-one or in a group. Focusing on the academics in the morning is best. We just all get exhausted looking at Zoom for a couple hours and need that time to be able to change things around. This one surprised me, and it shouldn't have. Advisors, homerooms, individual check-ins are probably more important even than the academic piece of it all. Again, that social emotional piece, that feeling of connectivity being critical. And then 5 is a truism in life at every point, which is no matter how many emails or notices you send out, there's just never enough communication. So what keeps me up at, oh, let me actually go back one here, sorry. So what's the fall look like? So Dennis, I appreciate you commenting. Thank you, Governor Whitmer, for the announcement like an hour ago about what's going to happen. As Dennis said, very concisely, she is optimistic for a fall return. I understand that June 30th will be the announcement that was announced today for the return to school roadmap that the Return to Learn Advisory Council will be putting out. So to some degree, we are waiting and seeing what's going to be allowed. But this is a little snapshot. I know it's probably too small to be able to see in detail, but we just released this to our parents on Monday. And I'll just highlight what each circle says. The first one is about safe spaces and safe practices. How are we going to develop our campus to maximize safe return for everybody? And just as quick math, if you say 6-foot distance between kindergartners, which is a fun thing to think about in and of itself, but let's hold on to that one. Then that means 1 student per 50 square feet of classroom space. And now you're looking at like half the capacity that you normally would. So we have a working group here that's thinking about our gym, our outdoor space, our stages, every single space is up for grabs. I've said use my office, if you think you can add more kids in. Safe practices are going to be all the things that have been talked about by so many, PPEs and air exchange and visitor entrance and all of that. So we have to get that first bubble taken care of no matter what. The second bubble says, what's the state going to allow? And what are local conditions going to allow? And then if we get to that, it's going to be basically 1 or 2 pathways. And this is where, again, I think our independence gives us some more flexibility than our public school peers. If we have to be fully clothed, well, I hope we have to be fully clothed. I do have pants on. If we have to be fully closed, then that's at Plan C that says, let's take what we've done and do version 2.0 that really, simplifies the formatting and make sure that content time is king, all the things I said. But if we have some or no restrictions, what we are going to try to do is develop parallel instruction. And what I mean by that is, for the youngest grades, if let's say you've got 2 3rd grades, 1 3rd grade teacher focusing his or her attention wholly on the remote learners, while at the same time, the one on campus focusing on those who are on campus. And the key here being to allow families some degree of choice. Because as I talk to fellow heads in schools that are moving farther along in the world on this one, what they have noticed is that at the beginning, parents are very hesitant, reluctant. I don't feel safe, even with safe spaces, safe practices. And then by week 2 and week 3, people begin to feel more comfortable with having their child on campus. So we have to be ready for third grade, that's 10 kids one week and then 14 the next week and then 16 the week after. That's hard to develop community, but I think it's going to be critical to allow parents to have that freedom. Probably in the chat, I haven't looked at the questions yet, will be, are we going to reduce the number of days, like do a Monday, Tuesday, or mornings only? And we haven't made those decisions yet, specifically because I want to make sure that we can maximize capacity first. And only if we have to throttle capacity, then would we tell families, this is what we have to do. I would so much rather be able to say, we can have anyone that wants to be on campus be on campus. We have a big campus, so we've got some space to play. And only if we can't then have to make the hard decisions about who gets dibs. Spoiler, I think the younger kids are probably the most critical to be able to get back into the building. For grades 5 to 8 then, parallel remote, meaning if I'm teaching 10 kids live and 10 kids remotely, I can do that by and large in the same format here. So I can respond to you while I'm responding to you right in front of me in class. Last slide or two, oops. Final slide, what keeps me up at night? Well, a lot of things, as you as well. And I think top of my list is really thinking about how are the children doing and how they're feeling, you know, as they come back into the fall. You know, imagine a kindergartner who is brand new to our school and has been with his family since March, essentially. And you have separation anxiety on a normal first day of school. What if, as a school, we are having to throttle, limit, or keep out parents who would normally love to hold their child's hand to walk into the building on that very first day? And that's just day one. So I think that social emotional piece is highest on my mind and the greatest worry that I have. We are devoting more time and resources with our school counselor and our health teacher and our medical assistant to be able to get at that. But I think, you know, we could triple our staff there and it still wouldn't be enough. How comfortable will our families be having their children return? That's going to be a big question. We haven't polled them yet. The trickier one is, how about faculty and staff? I have let faculty know to expect to be back on campus if we can be. And I want to make sure that we've ethically done our due diligence of providing those safe spaces and safe practices. But it may come to an awkward spot in which a faculty member doesn't feel comfortable but doesn't have a medical condition that precludes them from coming, and then that's going to be an interesting place to lean into. What critical shortages of tools are we going to run into? You know, we're all fighting over the same stuff. My inbox has been just wall-to-wall spam of buy our masks and buy our hand sanitizer, and we haven't wanted to panic buy until we really know what we need. And then finally, it's the how flexible can we be with that parallel instruction if we've got not 10 kids on campus and 10 kids off, but 2 kids on campus and 18 off, and then the next day 5 and 15, and then it changes every day. So that's my best effort at being able to tell you where we've been and where I think we're going. I think my last slide is just questions, at which point I'm going to stop share so that I can dig into the chat. Shall I roll right into that, or any words from you, Rosemary?
Roll away, John.
Right. Is the state providing guidelines for the fall to return to school yet? Not yet. I think that'll come June 30th. I'm going to be a little bit of the pessimist to assume it's still going to be written pretty broadly. And of course, a state guideline may be a recommendation as opposed to what our own parent community may feel comfortable with. Have I heard any teachers express that they themselves are not comfortable coming back? Yes, in the background, and some of it is a little bit of the chicken and the egg. They want to see what we're going to do to make their spaces safe. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. We've involved the faculty in our buildings and grounds group, as well as our health and safety group and our program development group. You know, these are the 3 circles that all kind of overlap. And honestly, I think having their feedback, buy-in, and construction of what that will be will help, I think, it's not a top-down decision of like, you get a mask and then that's the it. Are you, as a part of America, even though you are independent, how do you address systemic racism in school environment? Do you do anything with our students, parents, and staff? Sorry, that was a private question, Arthur. I apologize, but I'm jumping right in there. You know, hardest of all, I'll just, you know, we're seeking to respond to what's going on right outside of our doors and to respond to Black Lives Matter, the rise of recognition of systemic racism that certainly is not like it's new. Our diversity group has been meeting over, in fact, it met yesterday, it's going to meet again Tuesday. I actually I prefer the name we use, which is IDEA, which is Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity, and Action. with a focus on the A rather than just, you know, us talking about things. So we have been thinking about how to support not just all of our students, but to make sure that we are messaging and conveying to the community what is important to us. I can't give any proper answer in a very limited amount of time, because I think anything that's short is going to end up being too glib, but I'd be happy to talk further on that one. How do the options for public schools compare with Emerson's plans? I will definitely have inherent bias to assume that we do a nice job. So I recognize that I come with a biased set of lenses. We have it easier. I mean, I know that we do. I said earlier on, the vast majority of our families that pay tuition are able to pay that tuition, and that comes with a certain degree of comfort level from a socioeconomic status. Though our diversity with socioeconomics as well as race continues to grow, and we are continuing to support those initiatives, I'll give you a small example. The child who we know needs support, that needs a printer because they've got to print stuff out, we can spare them a printer because we can do that for one, because we don't think we're going to need to do that for 100. And so that's, I think, a level of individualization that is afforded to us both because of our independence and honestly because of the resources that we have. Thank you. Some very nice comments. I think that's it for questions. I'm looking at the clock and I'm a minute over. Inclusivity, diversity, equity, and action idea. And then I'll stop. Rosemary, back over to you. Sorry to run late.
I hope you heard the applause. That was a sound effect that was forwarded to me by my grandson, who just graduated 8th grade in San Francisco. And we watched his graduation on Zoom. So there are some benefits to distance learning. John, we so appreciate that presentation. How insightful. And to have you as a member of the club, an active member of the club, thank you. It was
Happy
really
to do it. Thank you. I appreciate you all listening to me for the 25 minutes.
Next week, we have, again, a member of the club, Mike Michelon. He's the executive director of the Ann Arbor Summer Festival. His topic, challenges confronting performing arts organizations in the age of coronavirus. My goodness, so today was all about kids and campers, kids going to school, and of course, Rotary helps kids succeed. And one of my favorite quotes is as follows: children are the silent messengers that we send to a time and place where we will never be. Thank you very much, Rotarians. You have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to take any other questions as people sign off, or just say thanks for giving me the chance and try to keep it sprightly.
That would be nice if you'd stay in the room for a few minutes, John. That would be good.
Yeah, excellent presentation, John.
Well, thanks.
John, can I ask you, relative to your kids with learning disabilities, because I know you guys have those kinds of kids, how, and those are the kiddos I work with, what kind of challenges have you been finding with them? Anything different? How you've been meeting their needs?
So we have, good question. So as we have a significant number of students for whom we see a need for individualization, some of whom would, I think, qualify under learning disabilities by technical definition. And so we've staffed 3 full-time people to support our learning support. We have a K-2 learning support director, we've got a 3 to 5, and we've got a 6 to 8. And so where they found their time during this separation is a lot of one-on-one time, which honestly is a lot like what their time is during the school day. So they were doing frequent check-ins, I think sometimes daily check-ins. I think the challenge is exactly the same as I was saying about one of the truths of school, which is it's not just about teaching the children, you know this, it's about teaching the parents how to do that with their children. You've got to My youngest son had a fairly significant speech impediment early on, and it took me getting kind of smacked upside the head by the therapist to be like, yeah, you have to change the way that you respond to him because you're learning his language as opposed to him learning yours. So I think that the shift that we had was about not just what the child needed, but supporting the parents to help them with that. So that was probably the biggest shift.
Yep, makes sense.
John, thank you. Just one question. What's the percentage of African-American students do you have there at Emerson?
I will give you a direct answer while I look off to the side of my screen, because racial diversity for trustees, faculty, student body is something that's part of my State of the School report. I'll tell you that I know the answer for African American students is lower than in Ann Arbor Public, and this continues to be a source of concern and push for our IDEA group, our diversity, equity, and social justice. So to be blunt, on the one hand, we can say we are very racially diverse in a way that matches up as a percentage level for Ann Arbor Independent Schools. But the one area of particular concern is underrepresentation of Black students. Let me give you the direct answer, because I like data. I know that'll come as a shock. But honestly, you know, it goes to the point, like, the things that matter are the things that you count, right? And so if we're not paying attention to that and sharing that with our community, then we're not caring about it. So the short answer is, sorry, slowly, I apologize. Racial and ethnic diversity. All right. So at the broadest level, then I'm going to go down. 47% of the students this past year identify as a person of color, either as Black, African American, Latino, Hispanic, which I know we get into race and ethnicity in that, Asian, Native American, multiracial, Pacific Islander, or Middle Eastern. So 47% is a high percentage. Employees is 14%, trustees is 20%. But then when we drill down to faculty, we match Ann Arbor Public, which is our catchment area, and I think a fair comparison in almost every way but African American. Caucasian, about half, 50-ish%. Asian, 15%. Ann Arbor's 14%. Middle Eastern, we count 6%. Interestingly, Ann Arbor doesn't count that in their statistics, which I find weird. African American, 3%. Ann Arbor counts 14%. Multiracial, we count 15, Ann Arbor counts 11, and then other or unsure is about 6%. Ann Arbor counts less than 1. So hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That's good. Appreciate it, John.
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions for John while we have him here? You get a break this summer, John?
Oh, that's funny. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh at you. I apologize. That was really rude. Well, in the sense that, you know, the days become a little more flexible, yes. But you know, in the other sense, as I said, we've got these 3 working groups: a buildings and grounds group, a program group, and a health and safety group. And, you know, we're on the clock to get something to our parents in pretty quick order here. And so I have a feeling that we're going to be still hard in the paint all the way up to the beginning of the school year, but we shall see. So I still hope to get a couple vacation days in the midst of that.
I hope so.
John, this is Ken Fisher, and can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, Ken.
Yeah, I as I look at the screen here of this group and then the larger group, you know, so many of us are removed somewhat from having kids who are in the age group that you're doing. I got to tell you how informative this was, and how great it was to hear you talk about it with your empathy for the kids. I just was really, really pleased to get to know you better as a result of this. And, you know, I want to thank you for everything you shared today and the way in which you did it. It was really important for, I think, all of us to know about the, you know, what we've got to do for these kids and their parents at this point, and everything that is required of parents these days during this pandemic. I mean, they got their jobs, they got to raise kids, they got to teach. This helped bring it all at home. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Bye, Abru.
Bye-bye. Thank you, John.
Bye, Abru.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you all. If no other questions, I'll say farewell, but happy to take one more if there is one.
It's wonderful. Thank you for picking up for Peter, too. I was worried when I saw that he was unable to participate, but I know it was necessary.
Yeah, no, and he sends his regrets. I didn't want to take up too much time. He had a loss in his family not too long ago. And when I reach out, Peter is, I know, a member of the club as well. He had been a member and then had a different position and came back here, rejoined. I had initially, when asked by Dennis very kindly and by the program committee, wanted to make sure that it wasn't so much about our story or to try to shine the spotlight to say that we're so good and we're doing it in a particular way. Though I am very proud, and try to generalize it to what schools and students are going through, and especially, honestly, high school, because that's like a whole other kettle of fish. So I'll save the high school stuff for somebody else, man. That's not me.
Arthur understands that.
I'm glad that I'm not back in the schools now at this point. Dealing with close to 3,000 kids is difficult to deal with.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
you
take
did
any
well,
one of these
Arthur.
things. How do you do meals? How do you get
Okay.
technology into kids' hands? It's just we have the advantage being small, and I couldn't conceive of it.
Yeah.
I had seen that online video of that teacher singing. I'd seen it once before, but it's still hilarious. It's so funny.
I was a little worried, like, Rotarians, it will get loud at the beginning. Please do not, suddenly, I didn't want a health condition to suddenly occur as a result of it.
And her guitar playing was so nice at the beginning, the nice introduction. And I'm thinking, as a music teacher, I said, nice introduction. Then when she yells, I was like, oh my God, that was hilarious. That was hilarious.
I'm glad, for those that got to see it, I'm glad it's still funny. And for those who was new, I'm glad it was an introduction. It perfectly encapsulated what I think everybody was feeling back in March.
Yeah. And your connection, your AVs were all solid, really very good.
I learned a couple things, and John was kind enough to support me. So I'm glad we did the run through. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had the volume on that one, because that was not a Zoom technique that I knew.
Yeah, we all learned.
All right, I'll sign off. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Take care. Yep, take care.
Everybody, you have a good week. It's so nice to see you all here.
Okay.
Bye.
Take
Goodbye.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Yes, thank you, John. Nice. And your haircut's really awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yep.
And I see you have the sign that's out on I-94.
Yeah, that's our sign for the Adopt a Highway.
Wow, that's a huge job we've got out there. Wow.
So you go by that sign and it announces that we have the next 2 miles. And as you drive by those 2 miles, I say, it looks like we better get out there soon. So there'll be a pickup time, a date in August, and Tom Millard's looking into whether the state's going to be able to support us at that time. And if so, I think we should get out there. And we'll just get everybody we can find and go out there, and shouldn't take very long. Certainly it'll take longer the first time than it will the second time, because it's been unattended for a while. But there's Tom. He's on the line now. So Tom's going to find out what the state can do for us.
Okay. All right.
All right. Still there, Tom? Nope.
No, afraid he's not.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Good job.
Yep.
And we'll see y'all next week.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Lori, we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.